Hey, my name is Evan. I'm 27. Until last month, I was just a carpenter living alone on a quiet coastal street, minding my own business. Then, one night during the worst storm of the year, the power went out and someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a woman I'd only seen from a distance, drenched, shivering, her wedding ring catching the lightning as she whispered, "Is there space left in your bed?" The rain was so loud I almost didn't hear her say, "I can't go home tonight." If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I was 27, living alone in a one-bedroom cottage on Seagrass Lane, when the storm knocked out the power and changed everything. It was past midnight when she knocked. The rain had been hammering my roof for hours, and I'd given up trying to sleep. I was sitting on my couch in the dark, listening to the wind tear at the shingles when three sharp knocks cut through the noise. I grabbed the flashlight and opened the door. She stood there in the rain, drenched, shivering, her dark hair plastered to her face. Water dripped from her torn dress onto my porch. She looked up at me with these wide, desperate eyes and whispered, "Is there space left in your bed?" For a second, I just stared. I'd seen her around the neighborhood. The woman who lived in the big glass house on the hill, always perfectly put together, always distant, and here she was, standing at my door like a lost bird. "Yes," I said. "My bed is yours. I'll take the couch." Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or surprise. I handed her a towel from the bathroom. "There's a change of clothes on the bed. Door stays open a crack, and we have tea first. No talking after lights out." She nodded and disappeared into my bedroom. I lit a few candles and put the kettle on my camp stove. The power lines were down all over the lane. This storm was bigger than most. While I waited for the water to boil, I laid out my old quilts on the couch and tried not to think about the fact that a complete stranger was changing clothes 10 feet away. When she came out, she was wearing my oversized flannel shirt and jeans that were too long for her. She'd tried to towel dry her hair, but it was still damp at the ends. In the candlelight, I could see she was older than I'd thought, maybe late 30s, beautiful in that careful, expensive way that made me feel like I should apologize for something. "I'm Evan," I said, handing her a mug of tea. "Margot." She wrapped her fingers around the ceramic like she was trying to steal its warmth. I noticed the wedding ring, white gold, simple, catching the candlelight. We sat at my small table without talking. The storm raged outside, and I could hear my neighbor Ruth's messages pinging on my phone from the kitchen counter. The whole street chat was probably lighting up. Power outages brought out the concerned citizens. "Thank you," Margot said finally, "for the boundary, for not assuming everyone needs shelter sometimes." She studied me over her mug. "You don't know me." "Don't need to." Something in her face softened. We sat in that comfortable quiet until she stood and padded back to the bedroom. I heard the springs creak as she settled in, then nothing but rain and wind. I was almost asleep when I heard her footsteps in the hallway. "Evan?" Her voice was small. Could I could I have another blanket?" I brought her one of my grandmother's quilts without stepping into the room. She stood in the doorway, and for just a moment we were close enough that I could smell her perfume under the wet wool and rain. "Bad night?" I asked quietly. She looked away. "I had guests tonight. It went wrong. I didn't push. People tell you what they need you to know." As I turned to go back to the couch, headlights swept across my front window. A car was idling on the street. I watched through the curtain as it pulled away after a minute or two. I texted my friend Jonas to check the downed power line in the morning and settled in for what was left of the night. When I woke up, gray light was filtering through the windows and the rain had softened to a steady whisper. I could hear movement in the kitchen, the smell of eggs and toast. Margot had folded my quilts into a neat stack and was standing at my stove, fully dressed in her clothes from last night. The torn hem of her dress was pinned up with a safety pin. "I hope you don't mind," she said, not turning around. "I wanted to make breakfast." "Mind? You're cooking in my kitchen. I'm not complaining." She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her. It changed her whole face. We ate without talking much. I offered to mend her dress, but she shook her head. When she asked if I had a comb, I gave her the one from my bathroom and tried not to watch her fix her hair. "I should go," she said, rinsing her plate. That's when Ruth knocked. I looked toward the bedroom door. It was half closed, and I could see Margot had frozen by the sink. "Just a second," I called, cracking the front door just enough to see Ruth standing on my porch with a basket of muffins. "Oh, Evan, honey, I was so worried about everyone in the storm. Who needed help last night? I saw lights moving around." "Can't talk right now, Ruth. Got something on the stove?" Behind me, a floorboard creaked softly. Ruth peered around me, trying to see into the house. "Well, you let me know if anyone needs anything. We all have to look out for each other." I took the muffins and thanked her, keeping the door mostly closed until she finally left. When I turned around, Margot was standing by the back door with her shoes in her hand. "Is there another way out?" I pointed to the back porch. "Through the yard, around the Hendersons' fence. You'll come out on Maple Street." She pulled her hood up and turned her ring, so the stone faced inward. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." After she left, I waited 5 minutes, then texted, "Safe?" A single dot appeared on my screen. Nothing else. That afternoon, I was planing cedar boards in my workshop when I remembered something. Yesterday, before the storm, I'd been walking past the gallery downtown and noticed water damage on the gutter above the entrance. The woman inside had been hanging paintings, moving with the kind of precise care that spoke of expensive things. It was the same woman who'd stood at my door in the rain. I finished my current project and walked downtown as the sun was setting. The gallery was about to close, but the door was still open. I found Margot inside, alone, staring at a painting of a lighthouse. "The gutter," I said from the doorway. "It's going to leak again if we get more rain." She turned. In the gallery's clean white light, she looked like she belonged there, polished, untouchable, but I could see something tired around her eyes. "You don't have to." "I want to." While I worked on the bracket, she told me about last night, how she'd been hosting a fundraiser at her house. Important people, lots of money, how her husband Daniel had made a joke about buying taste in front of all their guests, loud enough for everyone to hear. I needed to be somewhere else," she said, "somewhere I wasn't performing." The rain started again as I finished the repair. We stood under the gallery's awning, listening to it hit the street. "If this keeps up," I said carefully, "and you need shelter again, 2 flicks of my porch light means tea and conversation. Same rules as last night." She looked at me for a long moment. "Why?" "Because everyone needs shelter sometimes." A young woman with kind eyes came around the corner with keys. Margot's assistant, Lena. "This is Evan," Margot said, "the neighbor who fixes things." Lena's eyes went to the torn hem that was still pinned, then to my flannel shirt hanging loose over Margot's dress. She didn't say anything, but I could tell she was filing details away. Margot took off my shirt and folded it carefully. "I'll wash this and get it back to you." "Keep it for now," I said, "in case it rains again." As I walked home, the foghorn sounded once from the harbor, low and mournful. Porch lights were coming on up and down Seagrass Lane, little beacons in the gathering dusk. 3 nights later, it happened. I was carving dovetail joints for a cedar chest when I saw it. 2 quick flashes from the house on the hill. I put the kettle on, set out 2 mugs, and opened my door before she knocked. This time, she wasn't running from anything. She walked up my path in a rain jacket, hood down, taking her time. Tea? I asked. Tea. We sat by my front window, watching the storm. She told me about her work, how she'd started the gallery to show local artists, but ended up catering to summer people who wanted pretty seascapes for their second homes. I used to paint, she said, before I got married. Terrible paintings, but they were mine. I told her about my divorce, how Sarah and I had grown apart without ever fighting about it, just two people who woke up one day and realized they were strangers sharing a house. No villains in that story, Margot said. No, just two people who weren't right for each other. When she got up to leave, the wind shook my door so hard the latch rattled. Drive safe, I said. She paused at the door and touched the frame with her fingertips like she was blessing it. Thank you for the tea, Evan. Then she was gone, disappearing into the rain like she'd never been there at all. The next morning, Ruth texted about the town meeting. Something about the seawall and bringing concerns. Normal small town business. I was replacing a loose porch step when Daniel Hale walked by with his golden retriever. He stopped to chat. Friendly, charming, the kind of man who made conversation look effortless. You do real work, he said, watching me level the step. Or just favors for neighbors? Whatever needs fixing. Good man. This old neighborhood needs people like you. He smiled, but something in his eyes was calculating. You know, I've been meaning to get some work done on our place. Maybe you could swing by with an estimate? Sure thing. After he left, I got a text from an unknown number. Thank you for last night. I saved it as M. That afternoon, Lena called about a frame that had slipped before an opening. When I got to the gallery, I found Margot in the storeroom, trying to wrestle a heavy piece back into position. Here, I said, taking the weight, hold that corner. Our hands brushed as we maneuvered the frame, and I felt her catch her breath. The piece was crooked, and we both started laughing at the same time. The kind of soft, surprised laughter that's louder than it should be in a quiet space. A shadow crossed the frosted glass door. We both froze, frame suspended between us, not breathing. Footsteps passed by without stopping. Should be good now, I said quietly, setting the frame in place. She nodded, smoothing her hair. Thank you. That evening, I was making dinner when Ruth showed up with leftover cookies. For company, she said, peering around me into the house. Speaking of which, have you seen the Hales lately? Margot seemed upset at the market yesterday. Haven't seen them. I noticed a car on the street during the storm the other night, just sitting there. Probably nothing, but you know how people worry. I offered to fix her fence to change the subject. She accepted, said she'd been meaning to ask. After she left, I texted Margot. Ruth sniffing. The reply came back immediately. Noted, no light tonight. But when I looked up at the Hill house later, her windows were dark anyway. The next morning, I drove up to the Hales place with my toolbox and tape measure. The house was all glass and steel, perched on the hill like it was posing for a magazine. Daniel answered the door in pressed khakis and a polo shirt. Casual rich. Evan, come in, come in. He led me through rooms that looked like nobody actually lived in them. Can I pour you something? I've got a bourbon that'll change your life. I'm good. Thanks. I documented water damage on a windowsill, measured some loose trim. Standard stuff. Margot passed through the hall while I was working, and we managed a polite hello that felt like walking on glass. Lena mentioned your truck was at the gallery, Daniel said as I packed up. Good to see neighbors helping neighbors. Just a loose frame. He clapped me on the shoulder. Too friendly, too long. Well, we appreciate you looking out for local businesses. I left an itemized estimate on his counter and got out of there. The whole time, I felt like I was being studied. That night, I waited for 2 flicks from the hill. The sky was clear, no storms forecast. The porch light stayed dark. I built the cedar chest and thought about boundaries that felt more like promises, about tea in candlelight and the way Margot's ring caught the flame when she lifted her mug. I didn't text. She didn't either. 2 more nights passed. I finished the chest and placed it by my window with folded quilts inside. I told myself this was what normal people did. They met during a storm, shared shelter, and went back to their separate lives. But at 2:07 a.m. on the third night, my phone lit up the ceiling. Storm again. Are you awake? I looked outside. The wind was picking up, and clouds were moving in from the water. I typed back, I'll put the kettle on. When I opened my door the next morning, she wasn't there. Just a wool scarf tied around the door handle, heavy with something inside. A key. I untied the scarf and held the key in my palm. It was brass, old-fashioned, definitely not one I'd given anyone. I brought both inside and put the kettle on anyway, thinking she'd explain when she arrived. The knock came 10 minutes later. Just once, soft. Margot stepped inside, hair damp with mist, eyes wide with something close to panic. I didn't leave that, she said, staring at the scarf in my hands. What? The key. I found it on my doorstep this morning with a note that said, someone left you something at his door. From Ruth. We stood there looking at the key like it might explain itself. Someone's watching us, I said. She sank into a chair at my table. Daniel asked Lena about your truck yesterday, and he checked our phone records. What did you tell him? Nothing. I didn't know he was checking until Lena warned me. She rubbed her temples. I stopped signaling because I thought if I stayed away, you'd be safe. From what? Daniel owns half the rentals on this street. If rumors start flying... I set 2 mugs on the table but didn't pour the tea. Is that why you ghosted me? To protect me? Yes. Thank you, I said. But it didn't feel like protecting. She looked up at me. No, it felt like hiding. Thunder rolled in from offshore, still distant but getting closer. I could see the storm building through my kitchen window, dark clouds stacking like a wall. So, what do we do? I asked. She straightened in her chair, and for a moment I could see the woman who ran a gallery, who dealt with difficult artists and demanding clients. We make rules, she said, real ones, out loud. I poured the tea and sat across from her. Tea only, she said, counting on her fingers. Conversation only. Separate beds. Leave before dawn. Never use that key without texting first. Never lie if someone asks a direct question. And if the rumors start anyway, then we stop. Clean break. I repeated the rules back to her word for word. She nodded once, like we were taking vows. One more, I said. No promises beyond tonight. No promises beyond tonight. We drank our tea while the storm got closer. She told me about growing up in Boston, how her father taught her to see paintings the way other people read books. I told her about learning carpentry from my grandfather, how he showed me that every piece of wood has its own grain, its own story. Headlights swept across my kitchen wall. We both went still. The lights moved slow, deliberately. Someone cruising the lane. They paused in front of my cottage and I could hear an engine idling. Don't move, I whispered. We stayed frozen by the table, 2 neighbors discussing repair work, nothing more. After what felt like hours, the engine sound faded. Daniel? I asked. Probably. Margot stood and walked to my sink. She pulled off her wedding ring and set it on the counter, then picked it up and slid it back on. I should go. At the door, she stopped. Evan? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me with this. Instead of stepping away, she moved closer. She placed her forehead against mine. Just for a moment, both of us closing our eyes like we were listening to the same distant song. When she pulled back, her cheeks were flushed. Drive safe, I said. She pulled her hood up and walked into the rain. I watched until the darkness swallowed her. Over the next week, we fell into a routine that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. If thunder was forecast, 2 porch light flicks meant tea and conversation. She'd arrive with her hair in a messy bun and her ring turned inward. We'd sit by my window and talk about everything except the obvious: childhood summers, failed dinner parties, art that made her cry, work that made me feel useful. No touches, no long looks. The rules held. But on the third night, there was no storm in the forecast, just mist rolling in from the harbor. When I saw 2 quick flashes from the hill house anyway, I pretended it was because the weather report said chance of showers. She pretended the same thing. Looks like rain, she said when I opened the door. Better safe than sorry. Ruth posted in the street chat the next morning. Reminder: check on neighbors during storms. Drive slow on Seagrass Lane. Then she private messaged me. Good to see your porch light working again. I sent back a heart emoji and a photo of the gallery gutter I'd repaired. Neutral proof of normal neighborhood business. She let it go. That evening, I placed Margot's scarf inside the cedar chest with the quilts. The door latch made its familiar hollow thud when I closed the lid. 3 more nights passed. Each time, the pattern was the same. 2 flicks if clouds gathered, tea and conversation until she left before dawn. We talked about books we'd loved as kids, places we wanted to travel, the particular loneliness of being married to someone who didn't really see you. I learned that she used to paint watercolor landscapes that her art school professors called too emotional, that she'd stopped after Daniel told her they looked like the work of someone who didn't understand composition. She learned that I'd built my first bookshelf at 8, that my ex-wife had wanted me to go back to school for business, that I'd never felt more myself than when I was working with my hands. Some people think working with wood is simple, I said one night, watching rain streak the window. But every board has knots, grain patterns, places where it wants to split. You can't force it. You have to work with what it wants to be. Like people, she said quietly. Like people. On Friday, the weather app showed thunderstorms moving in after midnight. I set 2 mugs by the kettle and checked the time. 11:47 p.m. My phone buzzed. Forecast changed. I looked toward the hill house. 2 quick flashes answered from her porch. I opened my door before her feet hit the steps. Tea? I asked. Tea. This time felt different. She sat closer to the window, and when lightning lit up the lane, I could see something resolved in her face. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens when the storms stop coming. Do they stop coming? Winter storms do, but spring rain, summer thunderstorms. She turned her mug in her hands. There's always weather. Is that what we're calling this? Weather? She smiled, and it reached her eyes. What would you call it? Shelter. Shelter, she repeated like she was trying out the word. The storm moved closer, and we could hear the harbor buoy ringing in the distance. A foghorn answered from somewhere out on the water. Evan? Yeah? I'm glad it was your door I knocked on. Me too. When she left that morning, the rain had stopped, but mist hung in the air like a promise of more weather to come. I watched her walk down my path in the gray light, shoulders straight, hood down for the first time. Saturday was clear and bright. I spent the afternoon refinishing the cedar chest, running my hands over the smooth joints, the way the wood grain flowed from one board to the next. Jonas stopped by with coffee and donuts. You look different, he said, studying my face. Different how? Less, I don't know, less angry at the world. I hadn't realized I'd been angry at the world, but maybe I had been. Since Sarah left, maybe I'd been carrying that weight without knowing it. Good different? I asked. Yeah, good different. That evening, I moved the cedar chest under my front window and folded Margot's scarf inside with the quilts, not hiding it, just keeping it safe. Sunday brought clouds and the promise of rain. I worked in my shop until I heard the first drops on the roof, then went inside to wait. My phone buzzed at 9:23 p.m. Checking in, I typed back, "Always here." At 10:15, two flicks from the hill. This time, when she knocked, I was ready with tea already steaming and a plate of the cookies Ruth had brought. "Fancy," Margot said, hanging her jacket on my door hook. "I aim to please." We settled into our usual spots, but something was shifting. The careful distance we'd maintained was shrinking, not because we were moving closer, but because the space between us felt charged. "Daniel's going to Portland next weekend," she said. "Business trip." "Oh, 3 days." I looked at her across the table. "Are you telling me that because storms might happen while he's gone?" "I'm telling you because—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "Because I don't want to spend 3 days wondering if you're wondering where I am." "I would wonder." "Then I'm telling you." The rain picked up, drumming harder on the roof. She pulled her feet up onto the chair and wrapped her arms around her knees. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Shoot. Do you ever think about what we're doing here? Every day." "And?" I set down my mug and really looked at her. Hair escaping from her ponytail, makeup worn off hours ago, wearing my old flannel shirt over her own clothes because the temperature had dropped. "I think," I said slowly, "that some things don't have names, and maybe that's okay." "Maybe it is." Thunder cracked overhead, and she startled slightly. Without thinking, I reached across the table and touched her hand. We both froze. Her skin was warm, soft. I could feel her pulse under my thumb. "Sorry," I said, starting to pull away. "Don't." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Don't apologize." We sat like that for maybe 10 seconds, my hand covering hers on the table. Then, headlights swept the front window, and we both pulled back like we'd been burned. The car didn't stop this time, just cruised past, but the spell was broken. "I should," she said. "Yeah." She stood and gathered her things. At the door, she turned back. "Evan, what we just did, that wasn't part of the rules." "I know." "Are we changing the rules?" I thought about it, about the weight of her hand under mine, about the way she'd said my name like it meant something. "I don't know," I said finally. "Are we?" She smiled, sad and complicated. "I don't know either." After she left, I sat in my dark kitchen for a long time, listening to the storm move offshore. The cedar chest caught moonlight from the window, solid and permanent in a world that felt like it was shifting under my feet. I thought about rules and boundaries, about the difference between shelter and hiding, about the way some promises were made without words, kept without contracts. My phone buzzed once. "Thank you for tonight," I typed back. "Always." Then I deleted both messages and went to bed, falling asleep to the sound of rain that might last until morning or might clear by dawn. Weather was unpredictable that way, but some things you could count on. 2 flicks of a porch light, tea that stayed warm until you were ready to drink it, a door that opened before you knocked. Some mornings, the cedar chest caught the first light through my window just right, and I could see the grain pattern flowing like water, like it was telling me a story I was just beginning to understand.